But welcome to the Impact Women's Network. We have rebranded to become Impact Win formally. It's always been our hashtag, but now we even refer to ourselves as Impact Win. That's how you would pronounce the final two. So while Zoom might have updated and we have rebranded, we are still the same in being united and raising the public visibility of impactful women. It really is about creating a community where everybody's is equally visible, diversity is valued, and the power of the collective is mobilized towards change, towards creating a better world. And hence, it is very obvious and not coincidental that today is dedicated to COP26, where we'll discuss from different perspectives actually the change that's required and how we can come together to drive that change. For those of us who are new to us, the faces behind Impact Win are myself and Faye as co-founders, and Gemma, who really is the engine and the driving force behind the network. So any communications, informations, the social media you have seen is all Gemma, and this would just not be happening without Gemma. So Gemma, a big thank you to you. All of our years are themed. This year, we've themed it around inter-resilience. We were very keen to add the word inter, because we are talking about the resilience of systems, not the resilience of individuals, particularly being a predominantly women's network. The last thing we want are issues of resilience at a personal level to be connected with women. We certainly, through COVID, we've seen that women leaders have been particularly resilient, and yet the discourse around women, if you see a women's training, there's always going to be a resilience course. And we're going, no, as leaders, as women, we're fine the way we are, thank you very much. But actually, our systems are absolutely not resilient. And we need to create resilient teams and systems if we have any hope of taking on climate change, biodiversity loss, and other environmental and social crises. So our entire programs are purposeful, meaningful, sustainable, and impactful. If you would like to sponsor or speak or suggest a speaker, please let us know. And by us, I mean Gemma. Please let Gemma know. Our next one will be around creating our new workplaces. Lizzie and her colleague Kelly have been working on actually redefining the future of work and workplaces, and we'll be discussing that in December. We meet every first Wednesday of the month. Again, if you're new, if you're our regular members, you know that we meet for Impact Wednesday every first Wednesday of the month. In the morning, we have initially had people who tried to attend in the evening, but we always meet in the morning. Today, our session is in partnership with NatWest, and we are absolutely delighted by that because NatWest is also the official sponsor of COP26. But the more we've worked with NatWest, the more we have discovered shared values, shared interests, shared activities. So absolutely delighted to have NatWest as a partner, and even more delighted to introduce Debbie Lewis to you today, who will introduce us more to NatWest and tell us all sorts of exciting things. So Debbie, we're all yours.
Thanks, Shima, and thank you also to Gemma, who I know has worked so hard behind the scenes to get us ready for today. I think for many of you, when you hear NatWest is going to be presenting, you probably think, why on earth is this a natural choice? My dog's decided now's the time she's going to start singing in the background, so apologies for that noise. Why is NatWest doing all of this activity around COP, sustainability, and actually what has banking got to do with sustainability. And I probably felt the same way. I ran my own business for 18 years and joined the bank around 4 years ago as part of the enterprise team, so within business banking. And I am one of 65,000 global colleagues at NatWest who have been put through a sustainability champion program in the last year to help us be more informed and better ready for our partnership. We are a principal partner, as Shima said, at COP26. So who better to introduce this to you than our CEO, Alison Rose. She was actually in Cambridge last week to open our new sustainability focused branch. And so I have this video to share with you. She says, really hopefully, that this will run smoothly.
All over the UK, people and organisations are going one step greener to tackle climate change. NatWest's new sustainable branch in Cambridge is just one of the moves from the banking group as they recognise the role that the finance industry must play.
It's really important that everyone in the country embraces and goes one step greener. And this branch is a great example where we've used sustainable materials. We're buying our energy in here from renewable sources. We've worked with construction partners that are like-minded. And then where it's new furniture or carpets or fittings, then we've made them 100% recyclable as far as possible. But importantly as well, what we have in this branch is a real commitment to what we're trying to support. I think sustainability is seen as a real business opportunity. 25% of the spaces in our entrepreneur accelerators are now for green, climate-based, technology-based solutions so that we can help the next generation of entrepreneurs develop the solutions to address climate challenges.
Where does it come from? Creates kind clothes that tell tales. We were lucky enough to get onto the NatWest Accelerator programme over a year ago now. It was fantastic to be recognised for what we were doing. First of all, we focus on providing livelihoods for marginalised communities. Secondly, we look at how we can use the best processing materials to protect our climate. Being a part of the Accelerator has introduced us to a network of other businesses that are doing similar kinds of things that we are. So that's been amazing. There's been a lot of training, access to talks and things you can go to learn to make your business better and compete on a more level playing field with other businesses. So there's a huge amount of information there. For me personally, it's been the encouragement to think bigger, to go for it, and having someone believing in you is very, very empowering. I think NatWest has an amazing role to play when it comes to getting the message out about climate change.
I think it's very important. I think it's for all industries, in fact, should think about that. Sustainability around the operation of the business itself, so branches in this case, I guess, and head offices and so on.
I think it's very important that companies as yourselves cover climate change. It makes it accessible for everyone because it's such a global problem that you kind of feel like one person doesn't make a difference. But then if everyone makes their own little differences, then it's going to make a big change altogether.
You can make a really big difference to the climate just by the choices that you make. We've all got a role to play to get one step greener.
So that's a really nice introduction to our new home in Cambridge, and you'll see on the call today we've got Marta, who featured, give us a wave Marta, who featured in our video there at Alison's visit. Marta is looking after the enterprise space at the Petit Curie branch, and you may have noticed within the video clip that there is an area right at the front of the store there which we call our pop-up area, where if you are looking to raise awareness either for your business, your company, or perhaps a community project around sustainability, you can speak to Marta, and we'll share her details at the end of today's session about using that space either for an hour, a day, or a week at a time, where you can be front and center there in the shopping center to be able to promote your activities or your business. It's absolutely free of charge. You just need to be a banking customer, whether that is private, personal, commercial, corporate, business, across the NatWest group. So it's something we're really looking to utilise. And we also have an event space that holds up to 20 people, which we can't use at the moment because there's still COVID restrictions. But we're hoping very much in the new year that we'll be able to start making use of that. And again, there's absolutely no charge for that, and you don't need to be a customer to use the event space. So if you want to meet, you want to come and do some work there, please connect with Marta and she'll let you understand how better to use the space. So very briefly before I come to a close, I wanted to talk a little bit about the things that NatWest are doing other than having a focus on sustainability within the new branches that they're opening, because people will say, there's more to be done, and I absolutely agree. But the stuff that we're doing, I think, has been really impactful. So I mentioned already upskilling 65,000 colleagues globally. We also have started something called responsible lending. So responsible lending ensures that we are stopping lending and underwriting to companies with more than 15% of activities relating to coal, so on and so forth. So it's really just prioritising lending for sustainable solutions and planet-friendly activities. We're accelerating the speed of transition, so helping customers to reduce their carbon impact. Our customers have this year rolled out, or we've rolled out for our customers, a tool that helps them calculate, particularly within business banking, how much carbon they are using, and making suggestions as to how they can alter their business activities to reduce their carbon footprint. So that type of tracking, tracing and education we feel will make a really big difference. And then we've also set aside £100 billion for climate and sustainable funding and financing for our customers, as well as saving 25% of our accelerator places for climate focused businesses. So that's just some of the things that we're doing. I just have a very short video where Alison talks about getting our house in order. And while that plays, I'd like you to start thinking about what you've done already, either personally or professionally, so far. So for us in our household, I don't mind sharing that we decided, including the dog, we decided that we were going to have midweek meat-free meals. So Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, we eat plant-based meals only. My husband's a professional bodybuilder, so that was quite the challenge to take him away from eggs and chicken and beef. But it's something we've been doing for over a year now, and it's actually been an incredibly easy process compared to what I first thought. And for me, making one change, midweek meat-free meals, has just made me feel like I'm doing something personally. And then the other thing is clearing down unwanted storage on my computer. I had no idea that saving archived files had an impact on the environment. So the more education we can have and the tiny steps that we can make, I think can all add up to make a really big difference. So let's just have a final word from Alison before we move on.
Getting our own house in order is a big part of our commitment to supporting the climate transition for our customers. So we have already reached net zero for 2020, and that was through real concerted effort over a number of years to really focus on how we can make our own operations zero using renewable energy and making sure we can do all of those different things that are really important. I think that's about getting your own house in order. But I think businesses and companies have definitely seen, as a result of the pandemic, less travel. And of course, the use of technology has really been incredible in allowing people to connect in a different way. And perhaps the need to jump on a plane or travel as much as you need to has really diminished. And some of those changes, I think, will sustain as we go forward.
Lovely. So what I would love to happen from today's session is that we share what we've done already. That may encourage other people to make change, but also to think about what more we can do. And we talk about make one change. We were speaking with Nikki earlier about challenging that. One is not enough. We need to do more. But one step greener is the hashtag we'd love you to use off of the back of today's session to just raise awareness and start a conversation. Shima, I hope that's been helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Debbie. Yes, please do use the hashtag ImpactWin and One Step Greener as we go along, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But absolutely thinking about and sharing what it is that we're doing and thinking about what we're going to do next is exactly why we're here today. So again, it seems to be really rather slow. I'm attempting to share slides with you because I would like to introduce our speakers for today. We've got Professor Marie-Claire, who is an executive and a professor at Cambridge with extensive experience of COP. I think it's fair to say, Marie-Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've really kind of seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of COP. And so we're going to hear from Marie-Claire, from her perspective, where we are, what are the key challenges, what can we be doing, and some of the focuses of kind of individual, collective, and regulatory actions that are required. As a complement, our next speaker is Dr. Nikki Dee, formerly of the same department as I am at the University of Cambridge, and remains a colleague. There's a Cambridge, definitely a Cambridge flavor to today, who is one of the co-founders of Carbon 13, who will talk to us about how entrepreneurs and being entrepreneurial can actually underpin the changes that we need to make. So we're slightly behind schedule, but we'll catch up a couple of minutes towards the end. You'll still get the full time with our speakers and your roundtables, but we're going to hear our speakers, and then we're going to break out. And just as Debbie set it out for us, we're going to discuss what changes are you going to be making as a result of the talks you've heard today, as a result of being here, as a result of seeing the chats and people sharing their experience. What are you going to do in your context? And then we'll feed back to the group. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and invite Marie-Claire to take the space. Marie-Claire, we're in your hands for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. And you've asked me to fill us in a little bit on some of the progress that is being made in preparation for the COP26, and then of course what we hope will come out of it and what we can do ourselves. And that's a bit of a tall order for 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to be a good lawyer and keep it to 9 for you. So maybe first as introduction, I'm currently the Leverhulme Trust visiting professor here in the University of Cambridge, and also of course a full professor in the University of Waterloo in Canada. So my work here for the last 2 years has been very much focused on helping to engage with all of our colleagues, not just across all the institutes and departments in Cambridge, but also across different universities of diverse backgrounds from across the UK in some of the work that is going on around climate change, and that is being gathered together and shared, and ideally inspiring others in the COP26 itself. As you probably know, the COP26 was actually created by the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it didn't exist before that. You know, we signed a global treaty, and in the treaty, we promised to meet once a year and come together and to hold each other to our commitments and to help each other as countries, as stakeholders, to deliver on those commitments. The Framework Convention itself was, of course, signed in 1992. Now, at that time, I was, I think, just going into university. And I was included by my mentor, who was the Secretary General of the conference, Maurice Strong, and by groups of leaders from around the world who had organized youth preparatory meetings, and then the actual Rio Earth Summit itself. One of the things that I could see right away was that the implications of the Framework Convention on Climate Change, together with the other treaties signed in Rio, were world-changing. And it has now also, of course, been 26 COPs later. So imagine, I'm still here. We're looking at about, year 28 or something from 1992. My maths are very good. And what we've seen is an incredible sea change in those 30 years. There is an ancient African saying that a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, shared a few years ago, Wangari Maathai, before she passed away after winning the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on democracy and greening in Kenya and all of Africa. She said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you need to go together, be ready to go slowly. Now, this is a terrible and yet true saying when it comes to climate change. Many of our colleagues who can do more are stepping forward far and above what the COP itself can do and doing more. And so they should, for many reasons. But what the COP itself does is that it brings everyone together, including those who I've worked with very closely in many countries around the world in my time with the United Nations, with the International Development Law Organization, with different universities, who have maybe 3 people in their environment ministry that know anything about climate change and no lawyers. And they are still trying to go together with us. We have other colleagues who, due to geographical conditions or economic conditions, have based their entire economies, all the employment in their countries, on, shall we say, choices that are no longer viable, obsolete technologies. And they are trying to transition in a way that is just, and they also are not going as fast. And so what we are trying to do with the COP, and maybe the important context to remember, is that here we have now first the Kyoto Protocol, then the Paris Agreement. In Paris, we have a triangle of core obligations. Through nationally determined contributions to the global response to climate change, what we call NDCs, and in some cases, national adaptation plans as well, we commit to reduce our emissions. We commit to adapt and become resilient together. We do that backed by an incredible change in the way that finance operates in our world. So I was very, very glad to see our NatWest colleagues here. That's the second core piece of the Paris Agreement. And Debbie, I actually have a doctoral student who is working right now. She worked for EcoBank for 8 years after finishing her Oxford degree in environmental change. And she's come back for a PhD, and her study is looking at African banks and how they can ensure that their investment choices are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So I would love to put her in touch with you, because if she's got the courage and the commitment and the creativity to do this for African-owned banks working all over that continent that is so especially vulnerable to climate change and so much needs that resilience and that investment, then I think she'd be a wonderful person to be in touch with you. And I'm hoping that Adjoa sees this at some point and is able to actually speak directly to you. But these connections that are necessary, these commitments that are necessary, have to be backed by finance. And many of us are actually calling the current COP the finance COP, because there are very few countries in the world that can be in our presidency and advance changes in finance on the scale we need. I would have actually asked a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, whether even the UK had the capacity to do that. And let me tell you, if the UK can't, I don't know what is going to help the other 188 countries involved. But after seeing the scale and scope of the finance that was mobilized during the COVID pandemic, I'm not really questioning that anymore. I think if the political will is there, if the emergency is clear enough, if people understand what's at stake, the finance that is needed in the trillions can and should and will be mobilized in time. And let's not, fool ourselves. We're talking about an entire change of direction for a global economy built on something we didn't realize would make our future unsurvivable. So it's a bit of a big challenge there. And what we're also committed to, and this is crucial for that sort of triangle of obligations in the Paris Agreement that we're coming together to make happen today, is transparency. Monitoring, reporting, verification, stock takes, releases by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the scientists telling us exactly how far we are from the global targets we set. And the reporting that is needed has to be reporting that can be relied on. For the action I spoke about as the apex of the triangle, for the finance that has to flow to make that happen, and for the trust that is needed, trust that is badly bruised, and in some cases possibly close to broken. And I will be very clear here, that trust has been broken just as badly on the side of the developed countries and others who have the luxury to make choices here, and committed in Rio in '92, when we signed the UNFCCC, when we agreed to sustainable development, that we would ensure that we didn't try to stop other countries from improving conditions for their citizens, from stopping child mortality, from getting education for the people, from changing the unemployment rates, which if you take into account the informal economy, you know, we have revolutions in some countries when there's 10 or 11% unemployment. What do you do about over 100 countries where it's closer to 90%? Where very few are part of the formal economy at all. And yet they're here and they're trying and they're coming together. We're going forward together. The problem is urgent, more than urgent, desperately urgent. 4 degrees warming globally is unsurvivable. Our oceans are already rising. Our deserts are already spreading. The wildfires are already burning. The corals are already bleaching. The wetlands are drying up. The floods are coming with hundreds of thousands of pounds of damage.
In a matter of seconds.
What we need now is to be able to come together and make commitments, both formally in the complex technical details of the international law and the COP. Having served as a legal advisor to various presidencies, I'm fully aware of how difficult that is, and I wish all of my colleagues, bottom of my heart, the best of luck on that. But even more important, informally, with the finance initiatives, with the climate law and governance initiative, with the education and women's and youth and other initiatives that are being led at the COP, that will result in real change on the ground faster than any of our rules can. And I think I'll stop there, having promised to keep to 9 minutes, and be very, very open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. I'm sure there will be plenty of questions at the roundtable. You've touched on so many big and interesting issues, and it's so clear how we're all implicated in them. While they are global issues, actually they're happening because of the collective that's been pulling in the wrong direction. So if we can here start to dismantle some of that and start to take our own individual and micro collective responsibility on how to drive that change, that will be fantastic. Thank you so much for that scene setting. Nikki, can I invite you to take the stage, so to speak, and we're in your hands for the next 10 minutes.
Great to hear from you, Marie-Claire. I've got a million questions, so if other people don't have them, I will happily have a chat. Yeah, I thought I would, so I come at things from a slightly different perspective, and I've been in this space like Marie-Claire for too long, I always say, frustratingly long period of time. And I used to be referred to as a tree hugger, I suppose, which was kind of a derogatory term. And it came about because I'm a huge, the natural environment is something I've always massively appreciated. And I suppose that is the reason why I've always been very conscious of how our actions are affecting the planet. And my journey was a bit of a twisty turny one, I think, as for quite a few people in this space, in that I studied as a natural scientist in Cambridge, moved between the physical and biological sciences. I then left undergraduate and resisted what was happening to many of my friends, which was, you know, going to big consultancies, golden handshakes, all that kind of stuff, and saw a little notice on the board in zoology saying, I need an assistant for my PhD in marine research. And I thought, well, you know, I like diving. And that sounds like a fantastic way to kind of gather my thoughts and do some marine conservation work. When I went out to the Philippines, it was quite a challenging thing, and I was there for a few months with Tessa, and we were going to quite remote locations, looking at the fish populations and how destructive fishing practices were really damaging not just the reefs, but also the fish. We also had an opportunity to speak to locals about why this was so important. And we had some, you know, there were some places where we went down and it was just carnage, frankly. There was total bleaching, the coral had been destroyed and there were very little fish. There were other locations where it was absolutely stunning. So my frustration, however, in this grew because I realized that no matter how much time we were spending on the ground talking to people about these issues, people in the Philippines had aspirations to be like Americans. So they had beauty pageants, they were trying to make pizzas, even if they didn't have proper refrigeration for cheese. And it really brought me back to the UK saying, we really need to get our own house in order before we can start trying to dictate what we think other people should be doing, especially as they're looking to us to lead. So that sort of gives you a bit of a flavour of my mindset. I then started working at something called the Cambridge Entrepreneurship Centre in Cambridge, which was Shima will know all about this. It was quite a formative time for entrepreneurship in Cambridge, still quite a lot of resistance from academia, feeling like entrepreneurship was somehow tainting, you know, some of the academic work. And we worked on multiple different fronts. And then through that, I'd already been talking about extending my study, and it's a long story, I won't go into it today, but I accidentally did a PhD looking at how ventures with environmental technologies were developing in this space. And at the time, people were mostly focused on biotech and ICT. And I was insistent about this. And it was quite an intriguing process because I was able to look at entrepreneurship, not just as ventures themselves and the growth challenges that they were facing, but also from an industry perspective. And that's the piece that I find really fascinating when we talk about entrepreneurship. In the economy, the best creative force that we have within the economy are entrepreneurs. It sometimes seems really counterintuitive because many entrepreneurs are resource poor. You might expect big business to be the ones making the pioneering moves, but the entrepreneurs are the ones that have the freedom, the creativity to try things anew. So I very much got drawn into this space, recognizing that entrepreneurs are the change makers and we needed a huge amount of change to happen. And when you look at shocks in history and how, you know, even, you know, railways, canals, and how we see these big shifts in society that affect even the way that we live. Computers, I remember, you know, when computers first came in, we'll end up with a paperless office, and we have a huge amount of uncertainty with some of these new movements and the different types of tech that they bring. Yes, so I've worked with entrepreneurs, I've worked with big business trying to innovate in sustainability. I've worked across the Sustainable Development Goals with entrepreneurs doing really pioneering things for women's health, all the way through to climate change in developing and developed countries. In the last couple of years, I kind of went back to my PhD roots in many ways and ended up co-founding Carbon 13. Carbon 13 is a venture builder that is entirely focused on building ventures that have solutions for the climate emergency. one of my other slight bugbears in the space, and I know, Marie-Claire, you spoke about governments needing to have clear targets, and we need companies to have clear targets. And of course, the biggest one that we have is net zero, and the net of that zero is really important, by the way. However, as an entrepreneur, actually trying to evaluate what impact you might have is a bit more complicated than you might think. There are a huge amount of errors that we see depending on the assumptions that you use with things like life cycle analysis and everything else. And that's why we sometimes see from consumers as well as policymakers and others some quite strong knee-jerk reactions, and perhaps not doing things that really are the best for the planet. I suppose a great example would be shopping bags. So we banned, well, we didn't ban, but we started charging for single-use plastic bags. As a result, we all invested in reusable bags, usually with tougher plastic or cotton. And we've now ended up in the classic situation where many of us have ended up in a shop accidentally buying more than we thought, and then having to buy one of these reusable plastic bags. And we now know that the impact of that is much more significant than we would like to think, and actually probably surpasses that of single-use plastic bags. The reason I'm saying that is one of the things that entrepreneurs are really good at is obviously developing new solutions, but part of the art in this space is coming up with a business model that can really be quite transformative. So you're not just talking about a product, but you're actually talking about how that is going to affect people's behavior, and also as entrepreneurs work together, hopefully affect the system. And it's not just about entrepreneurs with businesses. I believe that entrepreneurship is something that should permeate every aspect of the world, from policy, you know, through to business, through to consumers. So I think that all of us need to be pioneering consumers. We need to be pioneering policymakers, and we really need to be pushing the boundaries and not just thinking about straight swaps, one thing for another, but actually how we're affecting the system. Just to very quickly finish and hopefully feed into the discussion. There are loads of things that we can do, and I know it was said earlier, but I would hope that there are many more than one thing that we can do. And as women as well, if you're familiar with Project Drawdown, they have a list of some of the actions that we need to take to affect climate change. The fifth most effective one that we could have is by addressing gender inequality. So there are some really powerful things that we can do, in addition to things like freezing our vegetables so they don't rot and contribute to methane, having meat-free days, remembering to take our reusable shopping bags so we don't have another one, putting a smart thermostat into our house. I hope that absolutely everybody has green electricity going into their houses right now. But yeah, there's a whole range of things, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm dead impressed by both you and Marie-Claire's spot on timing. Thank you very much, ladies. So we're going to break everybody up into breakout rooms, and we'll move you in and out of the breakout rooms as well to get a chance to get a feel of what's being said, but we'll get the rooms to feedback in plenary as well and address any common issues that come out there. But essentially, we're going to break out into two roundtables where the discussion is going to be, what is it that you can and will do or are doing in your context, in your sector? And you've been given lots of big issues there. Please try and expand what you're currently doing. Challenge the boundaries of where you're at the moment, boundaries of your sector. Nikki really kind of highlighted the point of being entrepreneurial. It is about seeing the world as it could be rather than as it is. And if you can see the world as it could be, what can you do to help get us there? You're not going to take on the big issue, but from your position, How can you help us get there? And let's have that discussion. We'll have 15 minutes from now, and in which case we're now in Gemma's hands. At any point in time,